Hello, welcome to Retrospective podcast, where we have raw, unedited, honest, and unscripted sort of podcasts with people from various backgrounds, including theatre, film, science, and other areas. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. Next week on the third podcast, I'm going to be joined by Lawrence Krauss, who is a prominent scientist, author of several best-selling books, including The Physics of Star Trek, Universe from Nothing. And we're going to be discussing his new book, The Physics of Climate Change. So if you have any questions for Lawrence, please let me know. However, today I am delighted to be joined by Tokyo-based actress, improviser, storyteller, comedian, have I missed anything? Christiane Brew.
Yay!
How are you?
I'm lovely. There's a lot to get through, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah, my list just goes on and on and on.
So, how have you coped with the COVID situation? What have you been up to?
Oh gosh, creatively, mentally, wellness. What do you need? What do you want from me, Justin?
So, what have you been up to creatively? Because it's been a really interesting time, hasn't it, for online content and performances? How has that affected what you do?
So, when it all started, the last live show was March this time last year, actually, and I thought, it'll be done in a month. We'll be over in a month, and then it wasn't over in a month. So I quickly adapted to Zoom shows and went down that route, taking Perfect Liars online, doing improvised performances online. Working with other directors around the world and comedy open mics around the world. And my last Perfect Lies show, we ran, I did 6 shows in five months, I think. And the last one was September. And the September show was just phenomenal. It was just, I couldn't do it any better. The cast was amazing. I was on point. I was rather fabulous. It just, everything worked. And then my motivation started to go. And I thought, let's just leave the best one up there. I can't do any better at the moment because mentally, I'd lost creativity, identity. And I just thought, I'm going to take a break. So
Right.
I've taken a break for October, November, December, for 3 months, 4 months, just
Wow.
being still.
Yeah. Okay, good. So you haven't done any online shows since then?
Nope. Oh,
No.
I'm a liar. I've worked very occasionally with groups around the world, improvising, who've invited me. And if it felt right, and it didn't interfere with my reading or my wellness, then I'm like, sure, I fancy that. So it's about saying yes to the things that spark joy and no to the things that don't spark joy, really.
Right. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you end up in Japan, and where were you brought up?
If I was doing a film noir, I'd say by an aeroplane. But I'm not doing a film noir, although sometimes I feel my life is like a film noir. That was rambling. I was on a beach in Italy.
Right. Yes.
And it was a windy Sunday afternoon, nothing else to do because it was very Catholic. And that's what we'd do on a Sunday. We'd hang out at the beach in the cold, drink espresso and wait for the pizza shop to open. And my friend said, how about Japan? And I said, yeah, okay. I guess if I don't like it, then I don't have to stay. And she said, it's only a 3-month contract. Let's go and apply. So we spent the afternoon applying for this 3-month position in Japan. And I got it. So they flew me over, and
Right.
at the end of 3 months, I wasn't finished. Japan, as you know, there's something about Japan that just, whoa, that gets you. That you always feel like there's something else to discover.
Yeah.
So I went back to England and then came back to Japan, and I thought, I'm only going to stay 4 months. And then I went back to England, went to China, came back to Japan. Then I went to Italy again to study. And then I came back to Japan. And then I thought, I'm going to have to stay because it's really tiring. Keep backward, forward every 4 months. And so I did. And then I moved to Tokyo. And I was in Nagoya before. And then when I moved to Tokyo, I wanted to not be with the teachers at the university all the time because it's laborious. And they weren't, it was all about drinking, and I was getting older. Not that you can tell. And then I went to improv classes. I studied improv a little bit in London years ago. I did acting years ago in London. I'm from Cambridge, by the way, but my family were in London and Cambridge. So I did a bit of London, bit of Cambridge, a bit of Essex. That's where all my training is. And then I rediscovered it in Japan. And I was like, oh, this is fun. I remember this. I feel young again. And that was 8 years ago. And so I've just continued, and one thing led to another, led to another, led to another. And it is like I'm reliving my teenage years again.
Yeah, no, you're right. Japan does that to you. I mean, I had planned to be here maybe 2 years, and here I am 8 years later, still here. So yeah,
With a
you're right.
family.
Yes.
Yeah.
My mother who was a daughter, 2.5 years old, Cordelia.
Yeah.
But it's a very comfortable place to live, and I think there's lots of opportunities if you happen to be an English speaker. We touched on it a bit earlier, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about perfect liars and storycraft. What is it? What do you do?
Okay, right. I love stories. Stories are everywhere. I grew up on stories. I've lived stories. Everyone lives stories, but I don't know. I've got this thing with stories. Maybe it's because I find it hard to communicate emotions in a conversation or process my life events. And I just find storytelling this wonderful artistic platform in order to communicate emotions and experiences. So it's been beautiful for me. So Perfect Liars is a comedy storytelling interrogation show that I took over from the founder about 3 years ago now. And 4 people tell a story, but only one is a lie. And the audience interrogate in the second half. So it's a live interaction with the audience, fielding questions, emceeing, and then we guess, and then the audience guess, and then they lose their noggins when they get it wrong, but they really they're less happy when they get it right. It's bizarre. They like it when they get it wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe because they can scream louder. I don't know. So because of that, I have literally coached hundreds of storytellers to bring their stories. Being artistic director of the show, previously it was like, come and tell a story. The director would give a little bit of direction, but I found that my calls would be 40 minutes to an hour long. So it's like a proper coaching session, and we'd look at purpose behind the story. We'd look at wording. We'd look at opportunities for comedic relief. And over the years, my skills grew and grew. And it became easier to spot things in stories. So now somebody could, for example, just give me one sentence of a story, and I'd be able to identify what needs to happen in that story in order to make it show worthy.
Right.
So because of that, and my passion for stories, I decided to bring about Storycraft, which is just everything stories, really.
Right.
And a platform for me to let people know that I'm really good at coaching and
Wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think probably doing it online would completely change the relationship of the performer and the audience. Have you tried it online?
Coaching or performance?
The performance, the Liars, the Perfect Liars Club. Have you tried it for an online audience?
Yeah. So soon after the lockdown, if you can call it that in Japan, soon after the lockdown, I did about 5 or 6 shows online, and then did the last one in September. And the first one was a bit clunky because you're working out how to bring in the audience. But then by September, it just flowed really, really well. I'd make a point of knowing exactly who was in the audience. You can't see them, but if I see their names, then it's about making their presence validated so that they know they haven't wasted their time, so they know they're not ignored, so they know they're seen. Acknowledging their comments, setting up the chat room so that audience feel comfortable bantering between each other, which is what they do in a real show, in a live show. And basically, they're creating the show for themselves. They're creating that social connection, the 7 dimensions of wellness, and one of them being social dimension. So they're creating it for themselves, being connected, manifesting positivity in all the comments and supporting each other, being British, poking fun at each other slightly in a fun sort of way. There's zero negativity. So they did a lot of the work. And then during the question time, we'd have the questions come through. I'd acknowledge them, make them feel seen. And then by the end of it, I knew exactly who to ask to bring on live. So I'd bring them on live, just their voices. And they'd ask a question live. So it was just all very exciting for them and for me and the performers. And it just felt like a really good community, positivity, joy, connection. That was it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's been very creative, because in a normal live theatre setting, it would be sort of unmanageable to have like maybe texting or with your phone or something. So it's sort of changed the relationship. But it's been very creative how people sort of brought in these sort of digital phones and Twitter and different things into the live performance.
Yeah, I think some improv shows have really done a great job with using technology to engage and integrate the audience into performances. But they are the type of troops that they have a theatre they need to maintain. They have a theatre they need to bring income in, so that they've got 5 or 6 performances happening every weekend. They've got workshops happening. They've really had to pull it out the bag to embrace technology and use it creatively to keep audiences and attract audiences from around the world. So it's a blessing and a curse, the virus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us about Lotus Consulting. What is it?
So Lotus Consulting is my freelance, the name I operate under for everything else that I do. I do business communications coaching. I'm a trained English teacher. I'm a fully trained English teacher, but I decided to move away from that because I missed creativity. And prior to coming to Japan, I was in corporate, and I missed corporate. So I've integrated creativity and performance with corporate. So under Lotus Consulting, I'll do my coaching for communications, which could involve improv for team building, improv for communication. I spent about 3 years on and off in India running workshops in Bangalore. It was lovely. Beautiful people, just they gave so much. Lovely. Doing communications workshops with startups and salespeople, but also working with the performance sector, the performance troops, to bring some ideas that I had and integrate with their ideas and see if we can create some beautiful performance magic together. So Lotus Consulting really is business communications coaching, applied improv, they call it. So using improvisation, disguising it, and then helping people communicate with it. Empowerment, for example, I do female empowerment programs for young women in Japan. So we talk about identity, leadership, positive mindset, presentation skills, that sort of thing. So I run that through them, through Lotus Consulting. Yeah.
Following on from female empowerment, there was an essay by Laura Mulvey called the male gaze theory, and she talked about the perspective of female performers and how it's often from the male point of view. Although the essay was written in the 1970s, do you feel female performers now are genuinely represented? Sorry, a bit of a deep question.
No, I do not. No, I don't.
Right.
Women of all different social status as well. It's not just women, but it's women of different social class, social status. Women of color and different ethnicities. I think all of the female groups are underrepresented. Then, of course, you've got non-binary, who they tend to be grouped in with the female-only workshops, if you like. Again, they're not being represented. They are starting to be represented actually in the voiceover industry. Literally in the last couple of weeks, I read something that you have male, female voices for voiceover on this voiceover platform, and the voiceover platform was approached by a non-binary person and said, "Hey, what about me? Do I audition for female or male?" And the director thought about it, the CEO thought about it, and it's like, well, it's not fair for you to do both. You need to decide who you are. And then he said, "I can't do that. That's not right." And so he created a new gender category, specifically for
Right.
non-binary, which is quite big in the pay-to-play voice platforms around the world.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And that's one thing in Japanese culture that isn't really spoken about a lot, is certainly from my point of view, often the female beauty or character is kind of represented in a sort of a young perspective. So, you know, you look at sort of manga magazines or advertising, and you see these very young girls in school uniforms or that kind of thing. What do you think of that, or what do you think needs to change in Japanese culture?
And big boobs. Don't forget the boobies, Justin.
Yes.
I'm sure you wouldn't. I don't forget the boobies. I think it's wrong because, as you can tell, not everyone is that age in the world. It's not really giving the young women and the men a true window into life.
Right.
If they're using 20-something beautiful young girls, sorry, they're not things, young girls, then with that 22 years comes a certain amount of experience, life experience, a certain type of life experience. So perhaps they've never had a serious illness. They've perhaps never had to overcome extreme trauma or obstacles or difficulties, or had a job and lost a job, been fired, redundancy, near homelessness, loved so deeply that it hurts and then lose that love, or death. Death is huge, obviously, more so for the people who die. But death is huge for those that are left living, because it changes you in such a way. Unless you've lived through it, you don't know how death of a close one can affect you. So these young girls have not experienced all of this. And it's, you know, think of all that experience that comes with a character that the young people are missing out on. They're missing out an opportunity to learn from somebody else's experiences, even if it is manga.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. A brilliant response. So let's finish on a lighter note. So I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions.
Okay.
Here we go. Sort of Larry King style. What is your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
Oh God. Biggest failure. Well, not quite failure, but nearly failure. In theory, it's a failure. GCSEs, age 15, England, in a desk in the assembly hall, maths test, the maths exam, GCSE maths exam. I was too scared to ask for a calculator. And you needed a calculator for the exam because you do. It's very difficult to do it without one. But Mr. Hemsley scared the shit out of me. He always looked like that. And I thought, I can't ask, because he said, make sure you bring a calculator. So I was scared. I didn't ask. I tried it without. I got an E, which is not good. Technically, to get a job in England, a C and above is much better than an E. But I got an E. That taught me, for God's sake, Christiane, just speak up.
Wow, brilliant.
Really?
Yeah, don't worry, I got an E as well in maths. So.
Oh, did you?
Yes, but I did have a calculator, so I had no excuse.
Oh, Jesus, Justin.
What what is the weirdest or strangest experience you've ever had?
When I tell the story, people say, "Oh my God." But for me, it was really, really normal because that was the world I was in at the time. I lived with the Maasai in Tanzania for 5 days or something. And I was the only white person who had stayed that long in a mud hut with a family. Previous tourists had to go and live in the like the more normal concrete building that they had there for the school. And word got around to the chief, and the chief summoned me, and we had this translation chain from Maasai to Swahili to English, English to Swahili to Maasai. And he asked me lots of questions. And then he said, if you could choose any child in the village, which child would you choose? So I got offered a child because I was worthy. And I seriously considered it. I seriously thought there is something that I can do to help help a child that needs it.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't though, but I spoke to family members, I spoke to lawyers.
Right.
Yeah, so I took it seriously as a woman,
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
a woman in her late 30s at the time. And I was like, do I want a natural birth? Do I want a baby? Perhaps I could adopt. And then I was offered this child, and I was like, well, this has to be. But it wasn't to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I
Wow,
know,
that's
right?
wow. What is the word you most dislike? The word you most dislike.
Oh gosh, my head's just going poo 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 poo. I can't say it on. It's rude.
Oh, can you spell it? What does it begin with?
Okay. It starts with C and rhymes with hunt.
Okay, got it. Wow.
Don't like it.
Yeah, it's yeah, that is it's a horrible word, isn't it? Yeah.
In comedy, using expletives at certain points in a story or in a live performance, when it's delivered in such a way at such a time, it's perfect, and you can bring an audience back to you and you can shock them with joy. But I would never use that word on stage. It's a word that does not belong in a performance from me or anyone on a Perfect Liars stage or any show that I produce or direct.
Wow.
Nah.
Wow. Brilliant. Okay,
Nah.
last question. What keeps you up at night?
The menopause.
And on that bombshell, thank you very much. It was very enjoyable. Brilliant. Okay, I'll chat to you afterwards. Thank you so much. That was really enjoyable.
Thank you,
Brilliant.
Justin. You're a star.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Okay.